Angus O'Brien is also here, Vanessa. He's UCL's Union Halls accommodation representative. Now, you've moved out of halls now, and you're paying, if you don't mind me asking, what?
I'm paying £125 a week for...
Which is less.
It is less, and it's much nicer as well, of course.
So what have you got?
I've got a flat, essentially, in Finsbury Park. And
you're not sharing a bathroom with 10 others? Now, Angus, what do you want from UCL? We've got a representative from UCL coming on later, Andrew Grainger, with Vanessa. What would you want to ask him?
Well, fundamentally, we want to enter a dialogue with UCL about this. This is affecting access to education at our university, and it's going to be a threat to the future if students aren't able to come to study at UCL if they simply can't afford it. We've been trying for a year now with the campaign to enter into a proper dialogue with them, so we want to talk to them. But we also want them to say something different, want them to say something new, and actually think about the problem that's going on. I know exactly what Andrew Grainger will say later today when he comes onto your programme. He will say that the hall's rents are competitive and that they match, they are better than a private market. We want to take it out of this context and put it back into the context of what's best for education.
Angus, thank you to you, George, Joss and Laura as well. So those are the views of the students here at Max Rain House on the Camden Road, Vanessa.
I don't know what people are going to be thinking about that, Jason.
The Vanessa Feltz Breakfast Show.
First for London, first for Londoners.
Weekday mornings from 7.
BBC Radio London.
Good morning. I hope you're enjoying the brand new breakfast show on BBC Radio London with me, Vanessa Feltz. It's lovely to have your company this morning. And one of our top London stories is this. Students are complaining. They say it's just too expensive to be students in London. The cost of accommodation is prohibitive. Hundreds of students at one London university have stopped paying their rent until it's cut. Protesters at University College London claim they're withholding over £250,000 until demands of a 40% rent cut are met. Our reporter Jason Rosen's been along there to talk to the students this morning.
It's about more than that. It's the concept of rent striking as something which introduces fairness. You know what I mean? And to say that you can do simple sums and make simple phone calls is just insulting, because we're talking about coming to UCL being about academic merit as opposed to price, as opposed to being wealthy.
Now, Vanessa, that's the answer from Josh Clark, who's 18, because do you remember I was asking him earlier about this? He pays £135 a week for his rent here at Max Rain House, which is on the Camden Road, which is one of the halls of residents who are on rent strike at the moment. And I asked Josh, he knew about the rent before. He obviously signed it off and said I could pay £135 a week. He took the room on, and I asked him why he was complaining about it now, and he said he didn't realise what it was going to be like living in London. And then you said, how could they not realise what it would be like to live here? And that's Josh's reply. They really are upset about this £135 a week that they pay in rent here at Max Rain House, which isn't too... It's not actually near the university at all. They also have to travel in to go and do their lectures. There's a desk, a bed, a window and a sink in the room that they pay £135 a week for, and they share a bathroom of about 10 to 15 people. So that is the situation. They are on rent strike. They say they want a 40% reduction in their rent, and then they'll be happier.
Every time Jason Rossum says there's a desk, a chair, a bed and a window, what's he expecting? A jacuzzi and Etruscan murals? What do you think there's going to be? A mosaic on the wall? What do you want there, Jason, for goodness sake?
Well, I know I didn't go to university, but I did go and visit some of my friends who went to university, and they had a little bit more. They had a little bathroom, so they didn't have to share a bathroom. There was a desk, chair and bed and window, but also a little bathroom as well, so they didn't have to share. And that's my experiences of a halls of residence, but they're not happy about it.
Jason, thank you very much indeed. Joining me live in the studio, Andrew Grainger, UCL's Director of Estates. Andrew, thanks very much indeed for coming in.
Thank you very much.
So we've heard from some of your students this morning. They're withholding their rents. It's £135 a week at Max Rain Hall, and they say it's just too expensive. It's too great a chunk of their grant. They can't afford to stay. They can't afford to live there, and also they could find something better outside. What do you have to say to that?
Well, first of all, let me say UCL is a not-for-profit organisation. It's a charitable organisation. So we charge rents to be as competitive as we can be in the market, but we need to invest in our estate, and it's really important that we're able to improve conditions and increase the amount of the capacity of student rooms we have, and that's critical. If we can't do that, then I'm afraid increasingly the private sector will be dominating the market. They're already 59% in London, and whilst the private sector does a good job, they are more expensive, and that can't be got away from. We need to invest in our estate, and the only way we can do that is through rents. But having said that, if I may,
yes,
our rents have been picked out by the NUS survey, the Unipol survey undertaken for the NUS, as we're doing a good job keeping our rents down. We have a significant proportion of our rents under £150 a week, and a very large proportion under £180 a week. That's very good performance in London terms. And actually our rents in recent years have gone up much less than many others.
So why are your students on strike then? Why are they not paying?
Well, that's a good question. I think it's a symptom of a number of things. One is that rents have gone up quite a bit, and there is a sense of housing costs in London, and the campaign themselves make this case. Housing costs in London are very high. That's sort of inescapable, and what politically that might be done about that, of course, is another question. But we sympathise with that. But we are doing our best in UCL to keep our rents as low as we practically can, whilst continuing to invest in our estate. And we acknowledge that Max Road and I for Evans are not in the best conditions. One of the reasons why they're lower cost than some of our other halls. Mm-hmm. But we also need to invest in new capacity, and that's very difficult.
So you're using student rents to invest in further improvement and building new accommodation for students.
Any surpluses we make are reinvested in the estate.
So you could decide to make less of a surplus and invest less, couldn't you?
Well, we are not making sufficient surplus at the moment to undertake the level of investment we want and need to take.
Well, everybody would like to be making more money, but maybe because the students are finding it so difficult, this is a time to acknowledge that it's a terrible struggle for them. And we heard from an architecture student, for example, at UCL, who says if you're a student of architecture, you really cannot do a part-time job at the same time. You're just too busy with your course. And I think you might concur that he's right. He's not exaggerating the work requirement as an architecture student, and he says he can't afford £135 a week. It's too much.
It's really tough. I acknowledge that, but the fact of the matter is there is no other source of funds to invest and improve our estate. We that's what we have to do. But
when you say improve and invest your estate, you're intending to build more student accommodation. Are you, or buy it, or what?
We want to improve the existing accommodation. So, for example, one of our major halls in Bloomsbury will be starting a project this year, which will cost us over £30 million.
Why? What are you doing
to investment? We're doing a significant extension, but most importantly, we're properly upgrading the accommodation, because we accept it's not up to modern standards and it's not what students want or need.
Gosh, so you accept that the product that you're offering them isn't up to standard, and yet you accept that you're charging them £135 a week because you need that money to invest in further accommodation and improving accommodation. So these poor students, I mean, you can see, can't you, from their point of view, that they're the ones in the substandard accommodation. They're the ones who are supposed to be funding the future development, which they're not going to benefit from or enjoy.
And the rents we're charging in those halls which are less high quality and need investment are significantly lower than other halls we have. But let me say, our rents are much, much lower than the private sector. So, and I don't wish to bash the
we
private
did speak
sector
to a fellow who says he's outside and he's got a nicer flat for £125 a week in Finsbury Park, he told us.
Well, in the private rented sector, just an individual flat, that might be possible, and of course most of our second-year students and third-year students do exactly that. But first years and first-year postgraduates like to come into halls of residence. That's a market.
What are you going to do if they just won't pay?
Well, they've signed a contract at the end of the day, but we don't want to get contractual about this.
You're suing your own students.
Of course, we don't wish to go there, of course. We want to talk to them. We want to enter into dialogue with them, because there are many...
I mean, they want a 40% reduction in the bill.
And that's not realistic.
They want 80 quid. They want it to be 80 quid a week.
That's not realistic. When I compare... Let me just give you a statistic, if I may. If I compare a good quality ensuite room in Bloomsbury that we let out to students, which might be around £8,500 a year, a similar room in the private sector, more distant from the university, would be over £12,000 a year. That's a huge difference. But we're competing with the private sector. If we want to acquire new sites and build new accommodation and keep the availability of cheaper accommodation to students, we have to be able to compete in that market.
Lots of the students that Jason spoke to said, we just didn't realise, we didn't know what it was going to be like in London, we didn't have any idea how expensive it was going to be. I said, possibly slightly facetiously, but I said, I hope they're not reading maths or economics or history or any of those, or geography, because really, ought they not to have done the sums before they came down? And if they're our brightest and our best, they ought to have been capable of doing just such sums on the back of an envelope, really, and working out whether they could afford afford it or not. But the serious underlying problem here would seem to be, do we only want rich students here, people from rich families? And are we going to rule out ordinary people from coming to London at all as students?
And that's a really important point, and it's something which UCL is, of course, very concerned about. And we have a very substantial programme of bursaries and scholarships which are targeted to families with lower incomes. And we're very proud of that, and I think our performance is very good in comparison with other institutions.
Andrew Grainger, thank you very much indeed for coming in. It's time now for the travel news.
Thank you, Vanessa. In Newington,